Everybody, happy Tuesday. Good to see you all again. Welcome back. Those of you that have been on for a long time, welcome back. Those of you that are new, I'm Dr. Roney. Tonight's a great episode. Liliana and Leigh are going to do EVOX, which is critical, right? So we talk about this all the time as far as some of the top causes of, I would say, chronic disease, right? And one of the main ones, I think, across the board is going to be stress and emotional stress. And we'll call it, is it fair to say emotional baggage?
Turbulence.
Emotional turbulence. That's very good. Okay, so emotional, I like that. I'm going to use that from now on. So emotional turbulence. But, I mean, who doesn't have it, right? And then who's not dealing, with things from way back? And I think it's safe to say trying to peel the layers back from the onion. Is that fair? And I keep looking that way because they're there and I'm going to introduce them. Come on. But I do want to say this. I was telling the gals off camera that this is a good tie-in for that I was involved with for the last 3 or 4 days. So I had kind of a patient that I've been working with, a family friend daughter that I've been working with for a while. And just from afar, meaning they had a little bit of sleep issues, a little bit of light anxiety, maybe going in and out of, not depression, but I would say low turns and so forth. Nothing crazy. I would call it a 2 or 3 out of 10, right? And then got a call that there's a big episode going on, and you would probably describe it as more of a manic episode. And so the point that I'll make with all that is I then got them kind of into the system where they were scared, nervous, and I recommended, hey, you might want to take them to the ER just to get checked out and maybe get some meds to help her calm down and get to sleep and things like that. Well, I don't know if anybody's ever gone into that system, but what happened was because that person in that stage becomes a little manic and then agitated and so forth, they kept her. And when they keep her, it's a 3-day max hold or minimum hold, right? It's called a 5150. And the point I'll make with this, I was so kind of distraught that this person who is an athlete, who is, really healthy individual, eats clean, athletic, works out constantly, went from this to this in a very short period of time. And then getting them into that system, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, you never want to be in that system, right? The reality was being involved is you could see, just like a good parallel to say cancer care, they really only have a tool or two in the toolbox and that's it. And this person talking to her realized after some sleep and so forth, right? Very cognizant, cognitively aware of everything, realized quickly that the people in there have no chance of getting better. Zero chance of getting better because there's only one tool in the toolbox. And it's either this or that med or we'll change them up. There were people that were in there, out of there, in there, out of there because they stopped taking a med or so forth. And I think, again, there's a point to all this. When I talk about prevention, I wish now looking back that I would have ran like Dutch test. I would have ran the methylation panels and the entire DNA company, for example. The DNA company runs mood and behavior. It runs methylation pathways and detox pathways and inflammation pathways and hormonal pathways as far as these epigenetic factors or SNPs that could create issues in those pathways that lead to these the neurotransmitters being affected and then figuring out the cortisol, figuring out the hormones, and figuring out the gut, and figuring out there's reasons. The point I'll make, there's reasons why that those symptoms occur. I don't believe for a second that diagnosis is there. The diagnosis of, say, bipolar or manic or whatever it might be is just a way for insurance companies and doctors, in my opinion, to communicate. But the reality is those, whatever you want to call it, has a list of causes that contribute to those symptoms. And that's all there is, they're symptoms. So EVOX, right, is a huge part of that as well. So it's one of the first things I recommended. We need to get some good therapy that peels back the layers of the onion. And then the second part is we need to make sure we create a plan metabolically We need to do maybe some even brain mapping. We need to do, so all the answers were there. I just didn't go down that road with this person because it was minor. Again, coming back to our topic each week that I talk about is prevention. I personally now am recommending doing all this to anybody, for everybody, whether you're trying to prevent cancer, some type of mental illness. I don't care what the diagnosis is, but doing all the steps that we talk about from a preventative standpoint is critical, okay? I think the EVOX part of this and the emotional part of this is significant to chronic illness and chronic disease, and they do a wonderful job here. I get nothing from both of them, nothing but positive feedback constantly. Matter of fact, I've really never heard a negative comment about either one or the process of doing EVOX. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up the screen, and then I'm going to bring on Liliana and Leanne and let them take over. Always, if you all need me, you just let me know, but I'm going to let them do their thing. So good to see you all.
We're so excited to be here. This is going to be so much fun. Liliana and I don't get to sit down and dive deep into some of these things only when we bump into each other, because we're here at the center on different days. So I think we're both really excited to get to have a back and forth discussion on this topic.
Yes, definitely.
This place we want to start is first just talking about what is EVOX as a therapy, as a technology. So many people say, I have never heard of EVOX before in my life, even though this is a technology that has been around for quite some time now. The way that I always like to describe it is EVOX combines two pieces of technology. So the first is something called voice mapping, and then the second is the biofeedback. So what we're doing with voice mapping is we know all day long whenever we're speaking, there are measurable tones in our voice that correlate to emotions. And so as we're sitting down with the patient, having a conversation about whatever the topic is, we're measuring those tones in the voice to get a graph of what emotions are coming up as imbalanced in relation to the topic we're discussing. Once we've identified those emotions, we're using biofeedback to output into the body the frequencies that have been found to help support the balancing and the release of those emotions. I'll quickly just speak to what I think the power of EVOX is, and then we're also going to get more into how we're using our conversation with patients to really facilitate even deeper healing. But EVOX as a technology by itself is so profound. What I really see it facilitating is I really believe EVOX is helping make the mind, the body, the spirit so much more malleable, if you will. Because I will have patients come in saying, I've done 18 years of therapy on this topic and it was still so stuck. And one EVOX session has completely shifted and cleared the way that I look at this. And so I really do believe it's helping balance the nervous system. It's helping shift those neural pathways that are just so stuck on old emotions, old experiences, old beliefs. So I think that's a great little introduction into what is EVOX. What we're going to spend some time getting into much deeper is, why is this work even important in terms of when you have a cancer diagnosis, in terms of preventing cancer? So I'll pass it off to you first, and then we're going to, I think, get into a nice back and forth.
So one of the things that the comments that I hear a lot, is, just tagging on with Leanne is, patients will say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe with the little words I said that the machine actually fed back to you my whole childhood or my mother's childhood. So what we're really dealing with is not so much on a conscious level, although when we actually get information and looking at the missing frequencies of their voice, and we can, they're called zones that we're looking at that will show up, I kind of look at them as a stop sign. So if you have a red stop sign, then that means, stop, because if you don't stop, you don't know what you're going to hit. So for Leanne and I, we look at that as an opportunity to, have, after the patient might speak about a specific topic and something comes up where it's in the red zone, then that gives us the identification. Let's stop before we go on and talk about this particular emotion that has showed up here. And so we're looking at subliminal programming, because all of us are a product of our childhood. When we did not have control of the environment, we became what the environment led us to believe in regards to if you were told you were a good girl or good boy, or you were good at sports or you were not good at sports, because we don't have any experience of ourselves, we begin to recognize that so they say, so I must be. And that's when the program starts. So I believe that it's the last trimester of a woman's pregnancy where the brain actually turns on and the programming begins, but based upon the mother's emotions. So I always say, happy mama, happy baby, right? Which makes a huge difference, because the reason for that is that they are now having this program and understanding the mother's emotion, is that they're now being how would I say, that they're being programmed to the potential environment that they're going to be born into, to what they should expect. And so again, I always say most adverse situations happen pre-verbal, right? When you were the most unable to be self-sufficient, and so you were at the mercy of your parents. And so when I ask people about trauma, nobody likes to hear that word trauma, because they identify it as, I didn't get abused in any way, shape, or form. I had the perfect childhood, this and that. But they don't realize that, a lot of trauma actually happened pre-verbally when, maybe I wasn't picked up in an appropriate time. Maybe the music was too loud and my nervous system was dysregulated, or maybe I was hungry and, my mom, was too busy to feed me. So many things that we don't realize have actually preset our program. So I would say about 90% of how we react to life are based upon our programs. And so what Leanne and our goal is to identify that these programs that may be sabotaging a person's state of wellness, or even any to fulfill any of their goals or wishes or desires, and bring it to their mind, because what you can't see, you can't fix. So what I love about the EVOX is that it's looking from a subliminal point of view of what is in the tissue that later can become the issue. And when we bring it to their attention, it's never a surprise, to patients. They're like, oh,
the resonance is there.
Like, oh
They're
my gosh, of course. Oh my gosh, you hit it on the nail. And it's not that either one of us have any psychic ability. It's just what we're able to do is we're able to interpret how the machine is picking up the feedback in regards of their emotional response to life. So, I find that it's an absolute wonderful tool. And I have a few therapists that I treat, one from Dr. Amon's clinic, and she's a therapist there. She works, she's a trauma specialist, and she, gave me the best compliment in the world. She said, it's just amazing how quickly you got to the root, where it takes me maybe 4 or 5 sessions for a person to even feel comfortable to talk about what I've told you in this one session.
Yeah.
And so that was really, nice to hear, coming from somebody who, is working in such a, profound way with people with, real serious trauma. And of course, there's no such thing as, any trauma being less as important, whether it's big T trauma or a little T trauma. So we're looking at all of that.
Yeah. And how does this translate into present day when a patient comes in to see us? So we're looking at, especially here at the Cancer Center as a whole, we're looking at what is going on? What are the imbalances that are contributing to this cancer that my body is experiencing? And so a lot of the conversations here on the Cancer Conversation Show are about what are the physiological imbalances. Here with EVOX, Liliana and I, we're looking at what are the emotional imbalances that might be contributing. And oftentimes, Lil and I we have kind of two edges of the coin, or two sides of the coin, where you do a lot of the generational patterning that we inherit. I sometimes focus a lot on what are the present day turbulence that I'm experiencing, and then tracking it back to where does this come from. But to give a quick example so that it starts to sink in a little bit, so many of our patients, I think every single one of our patients that come in, of course there's going to be emotional turbulence just around the diagnosis in general, that we can help support, give them more peace, more calm, more clarity, more confidence moving through this diagnosis. But they're coming in and we're immediately starting to talk about what is misaligned in my life. Some of the common patterns I see, which you might agree with, are individuals coming in, they are chronically overextending themselves. They are getting taken advantage of by people in their life. They're not setting boundaries. They're maybe in relationships that are completely ill-suited, maybe even abusive. These are some of those things that are causing turbulence for them. And then we're starting to backtrack and go, why? What are those deeper patterns? What are the deeper emotional and subconscious patterns that got me in this position in the first place that are keeping me from being able to create alignment, peace, and calm in my life, and starting to backtrack that. And I think that is so profound, because I haven't met a single patient who's come in who was like, yeah, everything is perfectly aligned in my life.
Never, I haven't either. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that one of my goals when I work with patients is try to get them to befriend their nervous system, to really recognize when they're in a regulated state, which is a calm state, a peaceful state. Now, of course, we can't stay in that state 24/7 because we don't have a Pollyanna lifestyle. And so we have different emotions that can hijack us and so forth. But we always want to know where our original home is. And, you know, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Stephen Porges of the polyvagal theory, but it would be somebody that I would actually investigate, because it breaks it down really quite simply. And so when I teach people how to befriend their nervous system, I'm teaching them how to recognize what operating system are they operating out of. Because when you're in a calm state, you're able to make good decisions, your digestion is good, your immune system is going to be more regulated. But when you're, so we just say like a first home, and so I'll just talk a little bit about the 3 homes that we have, and they're all safety homes. And think of a home away from home that's another home that's really far away from home. So the first state is when you're in regulation, you're in a peaceful state. We call that the ventricle state. I'm safe, I don't see any threats out there, life is going along. And then there's the next home, and this is where I'm into a situation where I'm looking for cues of threat. Is it safe environment? You know, I ran out of gas. I need to ask, you know, somebody if they would, you know, take me to the gas station. And I look at that person, I go, oh, that doesn't look like a friendly person. Oh, that looks like a safe person. So we're always looking for cues of safety in this state. And once we realize, you know, there's no danger, then we can move right back up to our natural home, which is that home of peace and calmness, right? But so many of us in situations where we have compromised immune system, where we, you know, the future is, you know, not as clear as they would like to have it. You can't say, okay, well, in 2 weeks after I take this medicine, I'm going to be on my way, and I can plan that and this, that. So there's a lot of conflict in regards to how their state of peace can be. And so when we stay in a dysregulated state, which is many of us, we're going 100 miles an hour, we're trying to do too many things in the day, go, the more, the better, right? But that is a very dysregulated state. And if you stay there too long, then it starts to play havoc on your organ systems, like your adrenal glands and like your GI system. Because when I'm under threat, I will not digest very well. And so the first thing I try to get them to understand that they cannot heal in a dysregulated state. We do not heal in chaos. We heal in a sense of calmness. And so when we stay in this state too long, then we go to the third home. And this third home is a home that's far away from home. So we can't, like any home that you're traveling to, you can't go from the furthest home back to safety right away. You've got to slowly have a method to do that. And that's called a dorsal state. And that state is where we're going through the motions in life, but we're really not feeling our emotions because it's not safe to feel our emotions. Leigh talked about situations like even in relationships, we might be in a relationship that really is not to our highest interest anymore. We may be married for 30 years or 40 years, but we feel like we're just roommates and we're really even not connecting. And so we don't have that regulation there. So it's not a safe and an emotionally safe environment. So I tell my patients it's really important to talk with your family members what a healing home actually looks like. So when you're in that dorsal state, which is it's kind of more like a helpless state. I don't want to feel my emotions because I don't know what to do with them. My coping skills aren't good. And this is where disease begins, is when we're in this state. And it's kind of like I go through the motions of being a wife or a mother or you know, a good employee, but I don't feel myself. So if I don't feel myself, I cannot actually meet any of my personal needs. And I would say, you know, how we work on getting people regulated is getting them to recognize what are their personal needs. So for me, just getting people to know, you know, how to befriend their nervous system is the first place where I like to stop. Because if you can identify, I'm dysregulated. Okay, the first thing I need to do is come back to peace. So is there someone that I can talk to, that someone that can comfort me, someone that I can go to? That's called co-regulation. If there's nobody there, I have to self-soothe. But I will never know how to self-soothe unless, as a child, I could create co-regulation with a safe parent. So it's quite interesting how your childhood will dictate the personality traits that you have, the labels that you'll receive, ADD, bipolar, things of that nature, but also the health conditions that you're going to get as an adult. So it's really pretty fascinating when you realize that, as Leanne said, that the brain is extremely malleable, but by repetition. Right? It's just like we were repeatedly told this over and over again. Now it just became, how I see myself. But if I, create, we say, a new synapses in our brain that gives us a different story when we go to this one, we say, okay, things that fire together begin to get wired together. And now we have the neuroplasticity starting to happen where we really can change. When people say to me, well, that's my personality. I can't change my personality. I say, why not? All those are the masks that you wear to get along in life, right? You are different to your child's school teacher, as you to your husband, as you to your boss, and so those are the masks. That's not who we are. So again, the other thing that's very important is for us to connect with them is, are you operating out of authenticity, right? Which is our natural state, just like calmness is our natural state.
Yeah. What I'll add to that is, to Liliana's point, we can't fully heal in a dysregulated state, because when we're in a state of threat or danger, our hormones are producing differently, we're digesting differently, we're not absorbing nutrients the same. So many different there's a whole physiological cascade to dysregulation. And so really, if we were to super simplify it down, what we're doing with EVOX paired with our conversation with patients is, you're in a dysregulated state. What is contributing to this dysregulated state that we can start to clear out? And it really falls into those two categories. What is the present day turbulence or the present day misalignments in my life that are contributing to dysregulation? And then what is the past? What is the past unprocessed turbulence that might also just be lingering and contributing to some of this dysregulation? And that past turbulence also includes some of the generational stuff, which we'll start to get into. What I want to quickly say with this, I love to give this analogy to patients because sometimes it doesn't always land why this work is important. Let's think about all of the unprocessed emotions, unprocessed experiences, things that I have never said, that I've left unsaid, that feel unvoiced, unheard. Let's think of those as like stuff tucked away in a closet. And if all day, every day, 50% of your energy is going towards keeping those closet doors shut, you only have 50% of your capacity to go fight this cancer. We need to clear up as much of your mind, body, and spirit's capacity to fight the cancer. And that is why this is so important. We don't realize how much the cost of this emotional turbulence is. And that is a big part, I think, of what we try to educate patients on as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you probably hear this too, is I don't know how, I can't, right? And then I say to them, the only thing that you absolutely have control that God has given you this lifetime are only two things. I said, do you know what those are? They're like, no. I said, well, how you think at the moment and how you feel at the moment. So the only reason it's going to be hard because you're ordaining it to be so. And you are a master hypnotist because you're with yourself 24/7, talking yourself into or talking yourself out of. And so I say, so you just have to ask yourself, when you're in a dysregulated state, how long do I want to stay there, and what is needed for me to get regulated? And we're going to talk about some of those, tools that we do use to help patients get regulated. Self-worth begins in the home. As Leanne said, is when a child feels I'm heard and I'm seen and I'm felt for who I am, and I'm treated as an individual and nurtured for my own nature, then I feel important to my clan. Now, validation and self-worth, those are two things you acquire in your home. You don't get them with degrees. You don't get them at Neiman Marcus with the clothes you wear or the car you drive. You get them because somebody made you feel important and they valued you. And so this is one of the things that I find oftentimes in a disease state is that their self-worth, okay, they feel guilty that they're even sick, or they say, of course this is going to happen to me. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. because they feel like, in life that they've had a lot of experience with not deserving happiness, not deserving joy, not deserving wealth, not deserving these things because they're fleeting, they come and go. And so I always say that validation and self-worth need to be equally yoked for you to be, healed completely. And I'm not talking about surviving cancer. I'm talking about thriving out of cancer. And so, I get people to say, okay, well, when, I do something positive, that I would reward a child. Good job. Oh, I'm so proud of you. That was awesome. I like the way you handled that. I need my patients to do that for themselves. So when that comes up in a zone, which with EVOX, it'll come up with, a lack of validation in childhood, then I say, well, you're no longer in that environment. You don't, so you have control over the operating system of your environment, which is your mind. So when you do things that you would be proud of, then you say, like when I work out, I say, good job. When I make a good meal, I say, oh my God, I love my food. Or when I do something that I'm proud of, I might do a little jingle. Oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. I do that for myself, not because I want people to go, oh, I'm so proud of you too, because I want to send that oxytocin to my brain, because what that does is it reaffirms to me I'm on the right path. Because it's really important for you to just recognize your emotional state is what's going to create your wellness, or it's going to keep you stuck in a disease state.
You reminded me of something Dr. Keneally says, which is everything I'm putting in or on my body is either helping my cells or hurting my cells. And I think from an emotional perspective, everything I am doing or not thinking or not thinking, the boundaries I'm setting or not setting, they're either confirming old repressed limiting beliefs, or they're confirming a new narrative that is expansive and healing. And that's something I challenge patients sometimes to think about. With this behavior, with this thought, with this emotion, am I ingraining an old belief, or am I helping foster a new belief?
Yeah. And again, it just takes time and takes, repetition of just reminding yourself of how I want to feel. Like I tell patients, say, well, oh yeah, this and this and this happened. I said, okay, well, let's look at it from a spiritual point of view. Everything in life is happening because it has to happen for your spiritual growth. I tell my patients who are on this journey, this is a hero's journey, but you've got a really heavy backpack on, and you're looking at a hill that you have to climb right now. And so all that you would consider your worries, your fears, that's really holding you down. So the first thing I do is say, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to have this mindset of imaginary backpack. And I want you to put it down, and I want you to be accountable for your overwhelm. And if there's people that you're worrying about, number one, you can't eat, think, and do for them. But you can die for them in regards to the emotional, stress that you can get from this, right? So if that's, I can't eat, think, and do, then really it's not my story, but I can be concerned. So I tell people, worry is a weed that will take over your garden and choke out all your beautiful plants in your garden. So worry is not beneficial at all. And I say, so let's take that word completely out of your vocabulary. And they look at me like, what? And I said, well, let's do nature hates a void. So let's put the word concerned in there. Now, concerned has a momentum. Worried is like, oh, I can't wait to wake up to worry. But concerned is, okay, I have an action plan. You got me at the tip of my chair. What is it that I need to do? I need to do, not what you need to do for me, because I can eat, think, and do for myself. And so I say you're sitting here because you're concerned. Now, if you're concerned about your children that you called worried and are taking, you're housing a story in your head that's depleting your energy field and you can do nothing about it, then let's have the word concern, but you need an invitation to help them. So if they're emoting and talking to you about their overwhelm and things like that, and any mother, right? You want to prevent your children from suffering, and so I always say, okay, well, if you're capable, you can, and you want to, and it will bring you some sense of relief, then you can say, I could help you with that. Now, if they say to you, no, Mom, I got it, don't worry about it, then what you need to do is look them straight in the eye, and you need to say, honey, I trust that you got it, but if you need my help, I'm just a phone call away. Now, what does that do? That imprints within them, Mom believes in me. But I'm not too proud that if I do need her help, I can call her. Because honestly, there's not any human being can get through life without help. you couldn't live one day outside the womb without help, and you still can't live, a good, healthy, emotionally stable life without co-regulation, socialization, which is part of being a human. Being a human is learning how to stay connected and feeling safe.
Mm-hmm. I love this question that I think we should sit with for a second. What are some signs a person needs to work on trauma? I think most patients we see come in going, yeah, I had some past experiences. I've worked on them. I think I've processed it and healed. I don't think there's any more work to do. This is why I love to workshop and puzzle out, what are you experiencing in your present day life? If you feel there are boundaries you need to set that you can't, that there are relational dynamics, whether it's with a romantic partner, a family member, a friend, that you can't seem to create alignment in, if you are constantly overextending yourself, if you walk around with worry every single day, or anger, or fear, or depression, or you're stuck in these behavioral patterns.
Anxiety, insomnia, GI disorders. I mean, there's a whole host.
All signs that there is work to do. And I think that's really impactful, going, oh yeah, oh no, I am afraid to set some boundaries. Oh, I do let my boss take advantage of me. Oh, I have a really hard time having vulnerable conversations with my partner. These are subtle, but these are signs that, yeah, there's some pieces we need to look at to create more alignment for you. And then to Liliana's point, we often are mapping out, and what are the physiological things that you're experiencing? Particularly when I have a patient come in, I'm always like, where's the cancer? What's the emotion associated with that organ? If it's lung cancer, we're going to be talking about grief. If it's something in the gut, we're going to be talking about fear, etc. Any number of different things.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about it, is that your body does not lie. Okay, and so when they're talking to us and we're picking up the missing frequencies, and it's a perception index that it comes up with 12 different zones. For example, if they're repressing their emotion, we're going to see the zone 7, which is the liver. Okay, which is healthy boundaries. So when you talk to somebody, how well are you at setting healthy boundaries? They'll say, I'm terrible. And then I'll say, well, obviously, it started in childhood, because since we weren't in control of our environment, we really didn't have control of, what we could do, what we couldn't do. And so we put up with a lot of things we didn't necessarily want to. And then in adulthood, you don't want to be rejected, because every child's fear is being rejected, right? And so we put up with things. We say, okay, well, it doesn't really bug me that much, but it does. So I say, if you're in a situation of discomfort, and I don't care what kind of discomfort it is, okay, is that first of all, you need to name it. Name it, and then after I name it, I say, what is the story that I'm telling myself, based on this emotion? Because I have to have to thought before I can feel. I need to think before I can feel. So what story did you tell yourself? And so since the liver is all about the mindset of repressing emotions, but especially what we call boundaries, or I call it healthy anger. Now people go, is there such thing as healthy anger? And I go, absolutely. Now, for example, if I'm doing something that offends you in any way, shape, or form, and you're getting a chemistry response, I would really want you to tell me. But if you put up with it because you don't want to be judged, or you don't want me to reject you in any way, you may be putting up with it. But that's like, putting your child in a very uncomfortable situation. When I talk to my patients about befriending their nervous system, I say, okay, well, not only do I want you to befriend it, but I want you to think of it as yourself when you were 3 to 4 years old. Smart enough to know better, but too young to know better. Because the children are they're influenced by the emotional atmosphere. Just like your immune system is influenced by the emotional atmosphere. Your immune system does not have critical thinking. So I say, think of your nervous system as that child. You wouldn't walk by a child that was having, stress or dysregulated. You stop and have compassionate curiosity. What's wrong? Well, I need you to do the same thing for yourself, and I need you to ask, what story are you telling yourself, and how can you validate its truth, right? Is it happening now? No, but it could. That's a no. And how do I scientifically know that it's going to happen exactly the way I'm thinking? I don't, but it could. That's a no. And you're reading the story to your child. How does this child feel? Scared. So 3 strikes, you're out, even in a court of law. So I say, okay, that is a bully in your child's playground. And would you let a bully play with your child? They say no. Then I say, okay, well, so those are the things, those are the weeds that we put out. And then we have the affirmations that the EVOX will generate according to what they need. And that's where we say, you pull pull the weed out, what are you going to plant in its place? So that's what the beauty about it is that the EVOX will actually come up with kinesthetically the affirmations that'll help ground them as they leave, and that's what I call their homework, to just solidify the work that we have done with them. And so anything want to add to that?
I don't think I'll add anything to that. I think to answer this question, why is EVOX crucial to cancer recovery? I think we've already answered this pretty much in full, but if I were to summarize it really, really succinctly, it's we cannot heal, as you said, in a dysregulated state. And just getting a cancer diagnosis is dysregulating. So even if we're just doing emotional work around processing the diagnosis and the turbulence that often comes with that, sometimes there's conflict with family, sometimes there's financial barriers, sometimes there's overwhelm with all the treatments we need to do. At a minimum, we need to be supporting that, because that is dysregulation. But then doing that deeper detective work that we do here of, and what is the root cause of that chronic dysregulation you've been experiencing?
So although this is not a formal diagnosis like post-traumatic syndrome or acute stress like Dr. Roney was talking about, it's gained a lot of traction. So in 1966, I think it was a Dr. Rackle, and she did, I guess, an experiment really in regards to assessing the children that were the offspring of trauma, the Holocaust, or the Great Famine, or the Civil War, and they did a study on this, and they recognized in generational trauma that it actually influences the DNA from an epigenetic point of view. So it doesn't disrupt the the sequencing of DNA, but it disrupts what we would consider the mutation that could potentially occur. And so what they realized, that they had a lot of mental disorders, they had idiopathic pain that was not being able to be diagnosed by certain things. And so they recognized, and now it's gaining a lot of traction in what we call generational trauma that has been passed over from one generation to the next. And with EVOX, I mean, I'm able to look at let's say 7 generations, okay? And so when we look at that, I oftentimes tell patients, what you're experiencing is not your fault, okay? And again, your parents did the best they possibly could, but if it's not my fault, because I was, it's a generational, they call them curses in the Bible, but a generational pattern that I did not participate in. But now that I'm aware of it, it's my responsibility to say, what am I going to do about it? So whether it's anxiety or insomnia or panic attacks or phobias or constant anger or depression, all of these things are generational. Because sometimes when I talk to my patients, they say there's no rhyme and reason for me to be depressed. There's no rhyme or reason for me to have what I have. So it really baffles me. Or even like for their diagnosis, they say, I've eaten good, I'm in a healthy relationship, but I have no conflict with my family. I don't get it, right? And I say, well, this is definitely not a punishment, but this is even though it's happening to your body, and you want to say this is a spiritual experience where you're going to learn something so significant about how you can actually evolve in this soul journey that we have. And so it's not about what is being taken away from you, it's about what is being revealed to you. And every adverse experience we have, it's all about, who did you become because of it? Did I become an angry, bitter person, or did I become a person who was more compassionate, more considerate, more loving? A lot of my patients are like, my heart is just so open because people that I never expected to come forward are just like, I didn't realize how much I was loved, right? And I say, good, that's really beautiful. But now that we can recognize, that maybe one of the things is to recognize that you are love, and that as you raise your frequency to happiness and joy and acceptance and surrender, then you now become in that state of calmness and peace to just say, okay, well, I'm going to show up and I'm going to trust my body, I'm going to trust God, I'm going to trust my guides in my life, and I'm going to look at everybody in my life as cheerleaders, but they're not on the same journey with me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love this question. I think this is important for us to maybe share one each.
Okay.
I'm thinking of an immediate one that comes to mind, a cancer patient with ovarian cancer that I started working with late last year. And she was here doing all the things, full in, 100% committed with all of the physiological work and tests that we do here, but also committed to doing EVOX every single week. And we were working through some different things, but the big core wound that surfaced for her was she, as a child, watched her father be abusive towards her mother. Mm-hmm. And what we really hit was her as the child absorbed so much of her mom's grief, and she was really carrying that grief, also that I wish I could have done something, stuck in that helpless state. And when we processed that and we were able to go, I can't heal what's not mine, I can only release it. And we helped her release that grief of her mom's that she was carrying. I remember it so vividly, that session, she was like, I literally feel like I'm levitating in the chair. I feel so light. And 2 weeks ago, she ran up to me on the floor, gave me a big hug, and said she's NED, which means no evidence of disease.
That's awesome.
She's doing everything here, but I think that's such a powerful testament.
It's so beautiful. So for example, one of the things that I have encountered is, and this is not necessarily a cancer patient, because we see anybody who's in a body, we say, you're going to have stuff no matter what. Big T trauma, little T trauma, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have cancer just to do EVOX, right? But anyway, she was telling me how in her mother had gone through, the famine, in regards to the famine where, there was not enough food. They had to stand in a bread line, things of that nature, right? And her mother, once it was all over and, there was, more of an ample food supply, that the mother became obese because she got her metabolism got dysregulated in regard of not having enough nutrients. So I don't know if anybody's fasted for a long period of time, that sometimes you go off fast, you cannot get full, right? You just keep eating because you get dysregulated. So the mother became, obese. And it was interesting to say that, she had a child, and her child, we call generational patterning, her child had bulimia. So even though she wasn't obese, it was still the nature of food, mm-hmm. and the nature of what we would consider that frequency. So frequencies aren't disrupted, they continue to replicate. So that's the beauty about EVOX. It's showing you a stagnant, like acupuncture would, stagnant chi energy in a specific area that we need to untangle, right? And then once we're able to do that, then it goes forward and back. So with the person that you're dealing with, yourself, and with your offspring. So that is what I think is really so powerful about EVOX, is that you have an experience. It's just not like talk therapy.
100%.
Yeah.
And to that point, we know the subconscious mind is responsible for 80 to 95% of our lived experience. Traditional talk therapy is only looking at really 5 to 10%. EVOX is getting into that subconscious, and I think that's one of the reasons why the impact is so profound and quick. Q&A?
Should we do Q&A? Was there anything else we wanted to add to that? I want to talk about a case study that I find so fun. I have an 85-year-old woman, okay, and I've been working with her for several years, and she had a lot of childhood adversities. And again, you can go online and do what's called the ACE test. And it's, it's really simple. It's like maybe 10 questions, and have you experienced X, Y, and Z in your home? And then they rate you in regards to, even, if you had, I think it's 60% of the people have had at least one childhood adversity. And so I won't go through them all, but it's really a fun test to take, to kind of just see, would EVOX help me, because I think that I'm perfectly fine, but wait a minute, I saw, this in my family, and this happened here, and my parents got divorced, and we coped with it, we got over it, right? But anyway, I had a woman who I've been working with, had a lot of childhood adversity, a lot of abandonment, a lot of separation, a lot of self-worth issues, a lot of lack of validation. So anyway, I've been working with her, and I love her. She for 3 years, once a month she comes to me, right? And now she's 85 years old, and she's in love for the first time to a 95-year-old man. And it's so beautiful, because she's like, oh, I feel so blessed, Liliana. She said, but I need you to help me, because I need you to kind of help me walk through so I don't sabotage myself in thinking that I'm not worthy of this love. And I said, and it was just so much fun to just, and so every week I just, like this week, in fact, she texted me and said, I'm going to bring my boyfriend. He's agreed to come, right? And I thought, oh, this is going to be so great. right? And so again, I always say this gives everybody hope, is that when you can do something to not blame yourself for what has happened, your feeling of lack of self-worth, validation, it had nothing to do with you. And so when you realize that you were actually born, as a divine light of love, and just to remember who you are, you can open yourself back up to feel. And so that was really such a heartwarming experience for me, and I just love it because she's like a little girl, and she's like, oh, okay, so let me tell you what happened, and then we kind of talk about it, and then I kind of help her kind of look at it from a point of view, and then she goes back and she has an experience, and she comes back and tells me, and she's like, oh my God, this is so great, I'm so happy. So you can even, look at things that, you thought were completely impossible and be so surprised. Wow, I never thought that would happen to me.
100%. I
so
love
cute.
that. I love that. Okay, let's pull this up. I'm going to start. I see that there's questions in the Q&A. There's also questions in the chat. So we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. So will I be able to notice a difference after an EVOX session? What difference will I notice? Will numerous sessions be required to realize a difference? You want to take that one to start?
Sure. So when I most of the work that I start always with generational patterning. So I have you talk about your mother, your father, your husband, if you have a significant other, yourself, and then the last one is going to be a topic specific. So when I do that, I'm able to map genetically who did you pattern after, your mom, your dad, or equal. And so is that important? You can't change that, but you say, okay, well, when I'm looking at their childhood, if you pattern more after one of your parents, then I'm going to be looking at it as a significant in regards of what you're talking to me about your dad's childhood, if that's who it was. And so I like to do 5 of them. I always kind of say this is the baseline. Let's work on de-entanglement of what you got that you are not aware of, that has been genetically passed over to you. And then after that, the topic specifics, what is on your mind, what do you feel that is occupying your mind that you wish wasn't, what behaviors do you have that are still causing you discomfort. So then after that, then we get into that. And so like I said, I've been working with a patient, I work with patients for years, and they love it because they said this is so much better than actual therapy, because it actually shifts me. Like Leanne said in the very beginning, people will say, I've been going to therapy for 15 years, and in one visit I feel like this was the best that I've ever had. And so I would say a minimum of 5 sessions probably would be a good start.
100%. I completely agree. You will notice a difference from the first session.
Yeah.
99% of people do, which is why I love it so much, because the impact is so fast. But it's not a magic pill. One hour session is not going to unravel 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 years of patterning.
Yeah, no. And again, people will shift right in the chair. They'll just be like, oh my, so I always say, well, how are you feeling? I feel light. I feel good, and sometimes, you might stir up some stuff. Okay. And they might say, God, I feel drained. And I say, okay, well, that's okay, because your body, just like if you were detoxing too quickly, you have a little bit of a, kind of a little sensation, what we call that a Herxheimer effect, right? And I say, well, then I want you to be really kind to yourself, and I want you to just go home and give yourself permission just to rest, drink a lot of water, because you've released some stuff that has been deep in there that you weren't quite aware of, and it took you by surprise as well.
Okay, a couple questions here. What's the emotion linked to left breast cancer? And then right below that, you mentioned liver cancer and grief. What emotion is associated with breast cancer? I'll quickly just correct. Lung cancer. Lung is associated with grief. Liver is associated with anger.
Yeah.
But left, I'll kind of distinguish left and right side. Left tends to represent feminine. Right represents masculine. Breast cancer tends to represent, we sometimes use the term unrest in the nest.
Yes.
What is the turbulence or the chaos in my home? Again, left side is feminine. Is there turbulence with my mother, or a female figure, or with my own femininity, my relationship to my femininity? Right side is masculine. Is there turbulence or unprocessed trauma, turbulence with my father, a male figure, or with my own masculinity? Sometimes I'm living in hypermasculinity and I don't have a good balance there, but that's what I tend to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we answered this a little bit. What is the average number of sessions needed? Roughly 5, but so many people find this therapy impactful that they want to keep going. Usually it's once a week for those first 5 sessions. And then once they get through those first 5, they might taper off to every other week, sometimes just once a month. But so many people find it so impactful that it becomes the emotional treatment of choice. That they're kind of trained to know, ooh, I'm experiencing some turbulence again, let me pop into EVOX.
Exactly, and you can do it remotely. And so if you're interested in that, we would order what's called the Cradle. And so I usually do it on FaceTime so that we can have, face-to-face contact, so that, we can see facial expressions. But you have to have a PC and not a Mac, because it doesn't match up to a Mac. They're not, what do you call
the remote software is only programmed for
it's only
Microsoft.
And so anyway, the actually the component is about $250. You would order it from us because you have to be a practitioner to do that. They would send it directly to you. The headset, so that you could hear the music, is about usually $35. So you own this equipment, so you can do it anytime. And believe me, I've done it all over the world. And Leanne, you do a lot of remote sessions too. So it's great. So it's just like you're sitting right in our office. You'll hear the music. You'll get the frequency, of the EVOX, Cradle as well. So it's just like being here, but in the comfort of your own home, which is nice. Can you describe the process by which EVOX untangles our mind? So the main thing is that if I won't know what to untangle unless I can name it. So again, being mindful is like, okay, that's the first thing I do, is being responsible. Is, how am I feeling? How long do I want to stay feeling this way? And how quickly can I get into regulation? And so just to talk about a few things of regulation, I would say the most important thing to me is that you have your breath 24/7, and that's for free. So I teach people how to do breath work so that they can, get back into their body. I say nature is the greatest regulator as well. So go out for a walk and or sing or hum or, talk to your friend. And these are all, things that don't cost you any money, but just cost you to be mindful. So once you're mindful and you can experience, am I dysregulated or am I regulated? And how do I get back home? Because back home is safety. Remember, we always have to know how we get back home. Oh, thank goodness we're here, right? And so we begin to untangle by being aware, and then start actually, taking responsibility of, because we're not always there, right? And like, Dr. Roney said that patient was having a manic episode and nobody knew what to do, right? And so maybe if they would have taken her outside and taken her for a walk and just had her breathe and tried to get her to, and never say calm down to somebody who's having a panic attack. You just want to just support them and making them feel safe, that they're going to be okay. They're not having a heart attack. It's all, let's go walk outside. Let's actually, do something that regulates you and brings you back to balance. And so the de-entanglement is by recognizing you have a discomfort and then asking yourself, how long do I want to stay here? And what are the tools I have to mitigate that?
And I think to go into it even deeper is, I think it's twofold. There's the process that we're using in conversation with patients to untangle or to process and release the turbulence. But EVOX, just as a technology, that biofeedback is very soothing to the nervous system. And I really do believe it's helping break those old neural pathways much, much quicker. We can break neural pathways by having conversation, by doing repetition. But I just find that when we're in an EVOX session and they're on the biofeedback, the shifts, the release of the emotions, the release of the beliefs that have been keeping them stuck happen 100 times faster, versus if we were just having conversation, as many of you may have experienced, just conversation by itself can be really impactful, but it speeds the process up so much quicker.
Yeah, I call it emotional acupuncture, right? So it's clearing the meridian fields and allowing for a greater recognition, a greater ownership, and so that makes it, a lot easier to look at what to do.
I want to quickly read a beautiful comment, and then there's a couple more questions from that. This is from Liz. So excited to have you amazing lady speak tonight. I was talking in the chat and singing your praises. EVOX has been life-changing and an integral part of my healing. Thank you so much, Liliana, for your love, support, and helping me trust my intuition. I wish this would have been one of the first things I did instead of one of the last. This should be everyone's starting point. It's a must. I don't think there's a one size fits all, but their therapy can help everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. You were so loved and so appreciated.
Thank you, Liz. That's so sweet.
So special. Okay, a couple more questions we're going to get to. What is the difference between this and EMDR? I get this question all the time, so I'll speak to that quickly. EMDR is purely about desensitization. For any who have done it before, you might know your therapist is going to choose a very specific memory. It could have been a moment of abuse, of trauma, and you are going to use that bilateral stimulation, whether it's with sound, visuals, tapping, to help desensitize your brain to that memory. That can be really impactful. EVOX can do the exact same thing. We're going a layer deeper though. Just desensitizing the brain can be huge. This is why there's so many studies on the impact of EMDR, but it's not the full piece of the puzzle. We can desensitize the brain, meaning when I think of this memory, I'm no longer getting riled up, charged, activated, triggered, and yet I still have repressed emotions. I still have limiting beliefs that got created and stored in my psyche from that experience. And I think that is where with EVOX and our conversation, we go that layer deeper.
Yeah, and everything can be complementary to each other.
Yeah, it's not one or the other.
Yeah,
I really think
there's no such thing as a one size fits all.
Yeah.
But we wanted to say whatever the patient resonates with, is the direction that you're always going to want to go using your intuition for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me pull up.
Feedback.
So real quickly on biofeedback, what we're doing is we're measuring the tones in the voice. So we're getting a graph of what emotions are being held and stored in the voice. Once we have those emotions mapped out, we are outputting frequencies into the body that help support the balancing and the release of those emotions. That's really the nitty-gritty of what's happening in terms of the tech.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like emotional acupuncture, right? You put a needle in, it's somewhere, down there, but it's really working on, my heart. And so again, when an acupuncturist is touching your wrist, she's going to tell you all kinds of stuff about you that you go, how did she possibly get that information by just feeling my pulse? Same thing, how did we get that information by just listening to the frequencies of your voice?
Liz saying it's like 10 therapy sessions in one. Yes. Okay, let me see some of the questions. Will EVOX help against those that got injured from the COVID jabs?
Yeah. In fact, I'm working with a patient because, one of the things that they face is, people don't believe them. Oh, well, I got the shot. In fact, I got multiple shots. There's nothing wrong with me. It's all in your head. You must be having some sort of a manic issue or having, right? And then of course that makes them feel like I'm not being heard, seen, and felt. And I would tell every patient, you don't need to be your own attorney. The bottom line is that, stay strong in your own belief systems, because if you're going to lean towards somebody else, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
What is a good way to get my daughter with cervical cancer to see the need for EVOX? I have tried to explain that emotional and spiritual healing is as important as physical healing, but she is not understanding. Have her watch this replay. Yeah. I think that's a good starting point. We could get into a whole dialogue here of what is within my power, what is not, and what's not within my power, I have to surrender as part of your own healing and emotional wellness and safety. But I mean, I know the replay of this is going to be made available.
Yeah, and also too is that, oftentimes they're not going to listen to the parent, right? And so, maybe you might just want to get her to listen to a few podcasts that are not necessarily about EVOX, but to really understand the emotional impact. Stephen Porges is amazing. He did the polyvagal theory. I would say Gabor Mate, which is all about the environment of the childhood, the personality, the diagnosis, the conditions that they have. He's a fabulous medical doctor. Deborah Dane, she really explains how to befriend the nervous system and why that is helpful. So again, maybe you might just want to suggest to her, and listen to them yourself and go, wow, they were super valuable. I mean, I listen to one of those podcasts every single day because it feeds me and it helps to, keep everything just right there at my fingertips, so that I can listen and then basically deliver when I come here a lot of times. So again, I would say start with maybe, not trying to convince her, but, getting her exposed to a mindset that she might resonate with.
Mm-hmm. What is the difference between this and neurofeedback? This is really a great question as well, kind of a similar along the lines of EMDR, because this is something I get asked all the time. Neurofeedback, again, is about neurofeedback is more body-based work. What is the impact of the trauma I experienced or the chronic stress to my body? Neurofeedback is really just helping rebalance the brain, and to our point earlier, that's important. That can be really impactful. Just rebalancing the brain, the imbalances in the brain are a symptom. So we can try to rebalance that and address that symptom, but if we're not going back and saying what caused this imbalance, what was the trauma, the experience, the adverse experience, the generational stuff, we're kind of soothing the impact of the trauma, but we're not actually solving it.
Yeah, we want to have what's called neuroception. Okay, that means I go inside and I feel what is happening on a chemical level in regards of what it is that I'm thinking about. Okay, Stephen Polyvagal Theory, another great book. Yes, he just
The Body Keeps the
The
Score.
Body Keeps the Score is wonderful. In fact, Stephen Porges and his son just put out a book. It's his new book, and his son is actually journalist. He's a journalist, and so he's really he said, I made my dad's work, which is super complicated, and for clinicians, something that is really practical for everybody. So I can't wait to get his book. So it sounds really great. So I would definitely look him up online and get out his new book that he did with his son, because it's super reader friendly.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to, it might be helpful too if we put our emails in the chat. I don't know, are you on social media?
Yeah.
That might be helpful too. I can type it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're always sharing and talking about this topic. This is what I live and breathe. I do EVOX all day, every day of the week. And so lots of great information to continue. Thank you guys so much for being here. There are so many resources. I could name 20 books right now that I think would be a great place to start. But putting our social medias up there, if you guys want to reach out directly to each of us for more resources, recommendations, I think we'll be super happy to send those your way.
Yeah, and another person I'm going to mention that I think is a great neuroscientist and makes it super simple is called Tara Swartz. And she's amazing, and she wrote. It's great because she wrote The Power of Manifestation from a scientific neuroscience point of view. So it's great. I love that book.
Yeah.
Because we all need to have that power of manifestation.
Do you want to type your email too?
Oh, okay.
Let's do that, and then we'll close it there. That way, because there's going to be so many more questions than we'll be able to get to. So we'll put those emails in there. That way, you guys can reach out to us directly.
So thank you guys for your time and for your interest. As you see, Leanne and I are very passionate because, we know what this work can and does do. And there's not a single day that goes by that each one of us don't have a wonderful experience in opening up our heart even bigger so that we could do God's work as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week.